The reward of a powerful magic item is arguably one of the most exciting moments for a player in D&D. The anticipation of what new powers or buffs it'll give them is enough to have made them the foremost reward for completing a quest or killing a boss. Your players are willing to go through all the deadly trials and challenges that we present them with just to get their hands on a fancy new weapon or magical armor. Because of this rather large level of expectation, it's important that magic items live up to the hype. If your players feel that their effort hasn't been appropriately rewarded, they're going to be less inclined to follow your plot hooks going forward. This then presents an opposite concern for us DMs that like to design our own magic items. What if we're so concerned about making it a grand reward that it breaks the delicate power balance that 5th edition D&D struggles to hold? In this video, I'll explain some of the considerations you should keep in mind when designing your own magic items. These will cover themes of balance, lore, and where to find ideas. So, let's get started. Tip 1. Understanding an item's significance. When designing a magic item, the first thing you need to consider is how meaningful you want the item to be. Magic items can be introduced in a variety of ways. Quest rewards, boss loot, magic shops, plot devices, random loot tables. Not every magic item your players find needs to be game-changing. Some can just be fun gimmicks or one-time consumables. By understanding the significance of the item, you'll be able to judge the correct level of detail that you'll need to put into its design. If the item is a wacky potion that you're introducing as a fun gimmick for a single session, then aside from the specifics of its effects, you don't need to spend much time coming up with a description or history. However, if the item is a legendary battle axe that is both a powerful upgrade to its wielder and an important plot device for an upcoming story arc, you'll want to give it the dedication it deserves when you design it. What powers or buffs does it grant? Does it have any prerequisites? What does it look like? What is its history and lore? And how did it end up at this location? By answering these questions, you'll be able to flesh out the magic item to a degree that's unnecessary for something that the characters are going to purchase from a magic shop or find when rummaging through the pockets of a goblin. Tip 2. Charges make for easy balancing. One of the most common methods for balancing a magic item is charges. By adding a set number of charges, you can encourage tactical thinking from your players and prevent them from becoming reliant on any particularly powerful abilities the item might grant. Charges can be utilized in two ways. The first option is to design an item that has one primary ability, and each time they use that ability, they expend a charge. This method allows you to be very direct with your charges. For example, the item has 3 charges, therefore the ability can be used 3 times. The other method for using charges is to design an item that has varying abilities that each have their own charge cost. This method requires a little more thinking on your part. If the weakest power has a low charge cost, the middle power has a medium charge cost, and the strongest power has a high charge cost, you'll need to figure out your exact charge maximum and ability costs to allow the weakest power to be used multiple times, while the strongest power can only be used sparingly. This will force your players to think strategically when using the item. Do they risk it all by expending all the charges on a single use of the strongest power, or do they use a combination of the 2 weaker abilities to get more uses out of the item? Another thing to consider when using charges in your magic item design is deciding what triggers the charges to reset to maximum. The most common method for this is to state that all charges return after completing a long rest. This is certainly the approach that works best mechanically, as the players are already used to resetting ability uses during a long rest. However, depending on the thematic flavor of the item, there are times when choosing another trigger may be appropriate. If your item is themed around the moon, then maybe the charges reset at midnight. If the item is a particularly powerful and violent weapon, maybe you regain a number of charges every time you land a critical hit with it. Don't be afraid to think creatively with your items, even for something as simple as recovering charges. Every time you make a choice based on lore, you're adding to the immersion of your world. Tip 3. Choose a game mechanic to focus on. After you get comfortable designing magic items, ideas will come quickly and naturally to you. But when first starting out, it can be difficult to think beyond a simple damage increase or an elemental damage option. A method I've come to use is deciding on a game mechanic that I want the magic item to interact with. Modifying the rules of a spell, providing new traversal options, buffing certain stats or abilities, creating instant traps, or even unique rules for summoning allied creatures are all things that I've built into my magic items. This method is especially useful if you have a character in mind for the item. You can work upon a class or racial feature that the player is unhappy with, and create a magic item that expands the ability into something they are more excited about. I recently created a magic item that allows my monk player to gain HP equal to their proficiency bonus whenever they expend a key point, which is something that they incorporated into their backstory. Speaking of having a character in mind, tip 4. Know when to use prerequisites. Sometimes you're going to have a specific character in mind when you're building an item, or you'll be working on something that only really makes sense for a certain class. When this is the case, try to assign prerequisites that will make it clear who the magic item is intended for. We all hope that our players are respectful of each other and share loot accordingly, but there is always the risk of a greedy player trying to claim something that is clearly intended for somebody else. Prerequisites can alleviate this to some degree. Prerequisites can be used for more than just specifying a class, too. Level, alignment, and stat minimum requirements are all commonly used to guide the party's hand in who would best utilize the item. And remember, you can always be creative and think outside the box when homebrewing, even with something as simple as what the prerequisites of an item are. A recent post on the Veneon Reforged blog included a range of magic items that used having a specific spell memorized as the prerequisites, and others that required you to have a spell slot of a specific level. Tip 5. Don't be afraid of one-time power-ups. As DMs, there are things we tend to fear our players doing, and high on that list is making light work of our strongest encounters. Contrary to this, players absolutely love feeling powerful and will seek out that moment of glory where they tend to overwhelm their foes. This tends to add a strange antagonistic feeling to encounter design, where the DM wants to challenge the players, and the players want to feel powerful enough to be a challenge to the monsters. Now, obviously we can't just let the players tear through every combat encounter with no challenge, or the game will quickly become stale and boring. We all know that temporary joy of enabling God mode in a game that quickly becomes a feeling of emptiness as all the friction is removed. But what we can do is provide the players with the tools needed to enable that momentary feeling of being unbeatable, and magic items are an excellent way to do this. By providing the players with a powerful, one-time use magic item, they can make an informed decision of when to activate it. In many cases, this will be a make or break moment when a boss is overwhelming the party and they need to take drastic action to survive. The choice to utilize these single-use magic items is often incredibly dramatic and can change the tone from a hopeless uphill battle to an epic scene of glory and loss. It's possible to increase the drama behind these kinds of magic items by adding a heavy cost. You should have a strong understanding of your players and what they enjoy before you attempt these kinds of high-risk, high-reward mechanics, but if you think your players would respond well to these kinds of sacrificial moments, they can become incredibly memorable. These costs can be anything from permanent, significant debuffs to the sacrifice of a character or the destruction of the magic item. And there you have it, 5 tips that will hopefully allow you to get started on homebrewing your own custom magic items. If one or more of these tips was useful to you, then legally you have to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I don't make the rules. If you'd like to ask questions or see my homebrewing process live, you can stop by twitch.tv/skull_the Norse Wolf. You can also join the community Discord where I host regular community one-shots in which we test out the homebrews that we design on stream or publish on the website. You can head over to veneonreforged.co.uk to find our backlog of free 5th edition homebrew content. Thanks so much for watching. In the next video, I'll be discussing homebrew races. Please look forward to it.